Hey everyone, welcome to a special Q&A episode of Faith and Fantasy with me, Kylie, aka Kat Kupfer. Since starting this podcast endeavor, I've definitely had some learning curves and changes and wanted to talk to you guys about my journey thus far. On the way, I will also answer some of the questions you guys submitted on social media. Before we get too into everything, let me start by saying that I don't usually do podcasts this way, but I'm actually kind of going free-flowing with this and I do not have a script, so hopefully I will be able to edit this down to make sense. And before we get into the long story about everything, one of the questions that was submitted is my favorite hair color I've done and a color I want to try. If you have not seen me visually either on my YouTube videos or on social media, I am often found with a pretty bright hair color. So we'll just go through a little bit of my hair journey. Let's go in chronological order just because it's easier that way. I was born a natural blonde, and I grew up not super loving being a blonde for multiple reasons, but I've always kind of just loved hair. It's still on my bucket list to actually go to cosmetology school and to get my hair license so that I can do people's hair because I absolutely love it. But when I turned 21, which was after I was married, I decided that I was going to take the first step and finally color my hair because coloring my hair was also something that my parents weren't like a super fan of and also just probably did not want to pay for, which it makes total sense because it is expensive. So for my 21st birthday, I went bleach blonde. And then about a year after having bleach blonde hair, one of my friends convinced me that it would probably be super easy for me to figure out how to do gray hair. And gray hair was somewhat becoming popular. And I found out that it actually wasn't too hard of a process to do that. So I had gray hair for a long time. And I had gray hair up until the point where I got a job and they said that gray hair was not a natural color, which I did try to argue that gray does come naturally to people. And they just said, not for your age. And I was just desperate to get out of the job that I had previously. So I said, whatever, fine. This is a good opportunity for me to change it up. So I went ahead and I went dark for the first time. So I went brunette. And then after that, I did black hair. And then I went straight from black to white because I just love a challenge. I went red. I went like a deep burgundy red, which was one of my favorite colors. But unfortunately, after like one wash, it would go away. Like it was no longer the dark burgundy. So that was not worth it, even though it was one of my favorites. Then I did have like a bright red for a while. And then I did like a coppery kind of color for a minute there. And then, gosh, at this point, the list of colors that I've done is starting to sound like that song from the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I've done yellow and then yellow with like orange tips at the bottom. Then I did like a peach color and then I did a corally pink color. And that corally pink was another one of my absolute favorites. I kept that one for a long time relative for me. I know for a lot of people, changing your hair as much as I do is kind of crazy, but I kept that one for a whole year. And that's actually quite an accomplishment for me. So after I was done with the coral pink color, I went to like a lavender purple, which a lot of people really enjoyed, but I did not because I felt too normal. And to try and remedy that, I did put a darker purple at the very bottom tips again, and that helped for a minute, but then I decided still felt too normal, so I went kind of like a denim blue all over. Then I did like a bright blue. I decided at that point, about like August 2025, I decided to do blue on the top and black on the bottom. And ever since, I've had black on the bottom with a different color on top. So I did the blue and then I did the purple on top and then I had kind of a white on top or like a grayish white. And then I changed that for a little bit to more of like a goldeny blonde. And now I have black on bottom still. And then the top of my head is a pinwheel pattern of orange and pink because I went in telling my hairstylist that I wanted to do the corally pink again. And unfortunately, the color that we had used in the past was no longer in stock. So she was like, oh, let's just mix together like this pink and this orange, and we should be able to get that corally color. And then I looked at both of them and I said, actually, I kind of want to just do both of them. And I'm really liking this actually because it is very fun. I really like the black on bottom because it makes my hair look a lot thicker than it is. So anyway, so that's my hair journey. And now that you've heard about my hair journey, let's move on onto my podcast journey, intermixed with these other questions. These are the rest of the questions that were submitted. 1, have I always been at ease speaking, teaching, and talking in front of people? 2, how did I meet my husband? 3, why did I change my name for the podcast, or why did I use a pseudonym before? And 4, what inspired me to do this podcast? I decided that all of these questions are somewhat intertwined, so I will be telling one big story that answers all of these questions kind of on the way. So as far as me being at ease speaking, teaching, and talking in front of people, I will say that, well, yes and no. I think I've always generally had something about me that has not cared what other people think, which lends itself fairly well to public speaking. So it's never been difficult in that way. Have I always been good at it? No. That was something that I decided to take upon myself. But there's a core memory, if you will, of when I was in 5th grade. There was a segment of our class at some point where they had all of us get up and we had to speak in front of the class, a 5-paragraph essay or whatever that we wrote. And the teacher would critique our stage presence, if you will. After I did my presentation, I had all these notes. I was fidgeting a bunch, or I was using a lot and things like that. So I really took that to heart and I was like, okay, there's things I need to be cognizant of. There are things that can make me better at this. And that was just something that I really wanted to do. And I decided that that was going to be something I was going to get good at. I haven't really been graded again on it, but I'm just kind of going off of feedback from other people. Please feel free to let me know if there's anything I need to work on or change or whatever. Also, in community college, I took an art of storytelling class where the whole thing was about how to talk in front of people, how to engage an audience, how to tell a story in a way that was performative. So that really helped with my public speaking ability as well. When I'm public speaking or speaking in front of people or doing a podcast like this, it's supposed to be engaging. I'm supposed to be telling a story. I want it to feel like a conversation and I want it to feel like a discussion. Also, I feel like it was remiss of me not to mention a couple of teachers that I've had that have truly inspired me to talk about the gospel in this way specifically. Speaking specifically about the gospel, that was a different journey. I would have to say that I had some of the best seminary teachers growing up. I don't know how I was blessed with such great seminary teachers, but the way that they taught seminary was huge to me. I may not remember all the lessons, but the thing that I gained most from those teachers, and I can't decide or not if I want to actually name drop them, but they know who they are. The way that they talked about the gospel was it was the most exciting thing that they could ever talk about. The way that they presented it, such passion and such excitement. I just remember thinking, I've never been taught scriptures or the gospel like this before. Usually in Sunday school, it's all very kind of reverent and it's all very soft and nice and mellow, inspirational type of vibe. But the way that these teachers would present lessons was have you heard about this amazing thing? And I just remember thinking I didn't even know you could talk about the scriptures this way. It just blew my mind, but it also tapped into something that I was feeling because I've always felt that way about the gospel and about Christ, but I just never saw someone talking about it in that way. I think that really just opened something up in me where I realized that talking about the gospel lit up inside me like a light. And getting into my college years where we'll answer how I met my husband and also another teacher that influenced both of us so much. So we both went to MCC, Mesa Community College in Arizona, and we were both at the Institute building. It was not quite a love at first sight type of story, but it is a love story all in the same. So I had a friend that I knew at Institute, and he was in my home ward. We had never really been friends growing up, but I knew of him. And so I was like, oh, cool, a friendly face. I'll chat with him. And then at that time, it was oh, I've never really gotten to know him before. Maybe I should see if there's anything there romantically. And so I was kind of talking to him after classes and in between classes and stuff at the Institute building. And there was a day where where a guy came out of another institute class and saw the friend that I was talking to. Was like, oh my gosh, like it's you, blah, blah, blah. They had apparently been on a mission together. They were never companions, but they did live in a same apartment because there was like a 4-man apartment. So they like got together and talking and doing all these, mission stories. I was just kind of listening and hanging out. That day came and went. And then there was another day. And I was once again talking to this friend from my home ward. Then once again, this guy came out of his institute class and interrupted and started talking about mission stories. And that happened a third day where basically he decided to commandeer the conversation and talk about mission stories. And me being a very not afraid of confrontation type of person, I just said, hey, do you realize you've interrupted our conversations like 3 days in a row? And after that, he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, and sat down and would just listen or join into the conversation rather than taking it over. After that, I think we kind of just orbited each other's circles for a minute. Then at some point, and I can't even say when, to be honest, it got this impression. It was a very distinct one. It just said, you should give him your number. And I was like, okay, sure. Because I was always the type of person to make the first move anyway. So he worked at a copy shop and I had to get some copies made for work. So I drove over there, and while I was getting my copies, I was like, hey, can I talk to Todd? And his coworker was like, oh, he's busy right now. Can I pass along a message? And I'm like, do you have a piece of paper that I can write something on? And so he gives me, okay, so this is a copy shop, mind you. Like they should have a lot of paper. So those like really tiny Post-it notes, not the big square ones, but like the really small ones. It was half of that because this company, they made their money by scrimping in every other place, basically. So it was this tiny, tiny square. So I wrote my number, that's all I had room for. I wrote my number and then just like text me in a really, really tiny font. I was like, can you please give this to Todd? And according to Todd, after I left, he, was like, hey, somebody's got a number. Todd said that in his mind, he wanted to play it cool. And so he waited 3 days to text me because he didn't know if I was interested. I have later told him over and over again that I would not have written on a tiny sticky note and given it to his coworker if I was not interested. Either way, we got together. He ended up texting me and we wanted to go out together. And I told him that for, surprisingly enough, my art of storytelling class, there was this storyteller I was going to go see, and it was a free event. And so, do you want to just come with me? And he's like, sure. And I didn't tell him what kind of storyteller it was going to be because I didn't want to scare him off. But on the way, it was too late to back out. So as we're driving over to this storyteller, I did reveal to him that this was a tap dancing storyteller, which it makes for a great story at this point. It's exactly what you think it is. It was basically a guy and he was reading Greek myths or something. And so he'd be like, and then Zeus did this and do a little tap number. So that was the beginning of our first date. And so it was very interesting. But afterwards, we decided we weren't really done and we didn't want to just go home. So we ended up heading over to a mall and got Dippin' Dots and just hung out outside of the mall and talked for literally hours. And I knew right then, and I think he said the same thing, where both of us just kind of were like, this is different. Something about this is different. Something about this person is different. I think this is what I want. This is what I've been looking for in a partner, in a person. And we did not go a day without seeing each other after that until we were literally married. We were married 6 months later. So if that gives you an idea, we were dating for 3 months, engaged, and then married 3 months after that. It was quite quick, but we just kind of knew. I don't think I've regretted it ever. So I think that impression for me to give him my number was, it truly could have only been divinely inspired because here we are. And I love him more than anything. He is my everything, and I'm in it for the long haul with this guy. So yeah, so that's how I met my husband. And so speaking of Institute, we did take some Institute classes together while we were dating and or engaged. And there was an Institute teacher. He knows who he is. And I think I may or may not have been told that he listens. And I hope I'm doing you proud. This Institute teacher changed my life and my husband's life because of the way he taught scripture stories. And I don't think I've ever let that go. There was one lesson in particular that stuck with me and I think is kind of the epitome of how he taught. It was this lesson about how the story of Teancum from the Book of Mormon can change your marriage. And the thing is it wasn't necessarily, once again, the actual lesson that changed my life. It was the fact that he took a scripture story that could have just been viewed as what it was in that time period did. But what he did was he made it into an allegory, a parable. And I think ever since then, I've been kind of operating on that same level. Hopefully, I really hope I'm actually doing it. The idea that it's like, okay, Teancum, the first time he went in to, assassinate someone, which once again is like crazy story to use for saving your marriage, but that's the best part about it. It's like the first time he went in, he had a plan beforehand. He was calculated, and then he drove the javelin like straight into the heart of it. And what he was talking about was how we approach conflict. Do we come in calm and collected with a plan? Do we approach it with reverence and or deliberation? And then do we get straight to the heart of it? Because then the second time Teancum tries to assassinate someone, he fails. And it's because he did not plan beforehand. He did not go through the necessary preparations. He threw the javelin way before he was supposed to. He wasn't aiming straight for the heart, and he ended up missing. And then I think he ended up dying. Forgive me if I get that scripture story wrong. But the big part of it was like, you don't have to look at the scriptures from the lens of just that story. And maybe everyone else is already like, oh, well, duh, like that's kind of the point. But I think that was just something very new to me. Yes, it's important to know the stories, and it's important to know the context, and it's important to know all these things, but like, how is it changing your life? His big thing was like, so what? And I like to ask that all the time too now. So what if you know this story and know what the general principles are? How are you using these stories? How are you changing your life because of these stories? And that's something that he left with me that I don't think I will ever forget and just really appreciate. So jumping ahead a little bit, ever since then, just kind of growing in my faith journey and in my marriage, and now as a parent and all these things, I've always known that I've wanted to share the gospel. I love teaching. I love talking about the gospel. But often in my life, I've found myself more often with people who are not members of the church than are. And part of that is because I really enjoy being a missionary, and I really enjoy being people's connection to the church. I can often be somewhat of an unorthodox member, I guess, myself. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But I've found myself in those places a lot. But there was always a part of me that was sad that I wasn't able to really discuss gospel topics or teachings or things. I kind of wanted to deep dive into things, and I've always wanted to have real kind of spiraling conversations, which my husband has been such a great sport in all of our marriage, because typically he was the one I was spiraling with, and he was the one that I was going to with all of my weird, crazy, have we thought about this in this way before? And did we ever think that this could actually be something that's a gospel principle? Or what can trees tell us about who God is? And, sometimes my ideas are great. Sometimes they're not so great. So he's often my sounding board for my crazy ideas, because I can often get off on weird tangents or things. And he's like my anchor. He brings me back to earth, and we've gone too far. Let's get back to a center that we can both agree on. And he's been really great for that. But I think that kind of is what inspired me to do this podcast, because I've wanted to have a platform where I can talk about all this stuff, and that I can just kind of spiral and get weird and just talk about weird random things, but in a deep way. And my big hope was that it would also stimulate more conversation, and people would want to talk to me about this kind of stuff, or text me or message me or whatever. So honestly, please interact on social media with me if you feel so inclined. Obviously, don't do it if you don't want to. But like, if you've ever thought, I want to talk to her about this random thing, or I want to message her about this, or this is a really cool thought I had about this episode, please tell me. I would never turn away a conversation. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I just feel like there's a space for this kind of conversation, and I want to be a person to make a space for it. So in making my podcast, I did struggle for a while with the decision of whether or not to use my real name or to have a pseudonym, which I realize in hindsight, I probably should have just started with my name. But I convinced myself that I didn't want to be an influencer. I didn't necessarily want people to start following me. I didn't want to post videos about what I had for breakfast today for some reason. I really wanted it to just be about the gospel conversation. I didn't want it to be about me or like who I am as a person. But as time has gone on with this, I realized that that's actually somewhat of a safety mechanism, because like I said, I am often in circles where I'm the only member, and all of the people I know are such wonderful, amazing people, but I know that there are a lot of them who still are not necessarily like pro-Christian or pro-Christian teachings or pro-religion or any of those things. And so I think there was a part of me that wanted to create a separation so that the people who are in my life that I really care about and don't want to lose don't find a reason to push me away. And I have come to the conclusion that I can't let that rule me because I would die for my beliefs. There's nothing that could happen to me or that somebody could say to me that would change how I believe. And if that's true, then I shouldn't have to hide behind a different name. And I was also really inspired because I saw another podcaster that I really admire post about her getting recognition in a church magazine about women of faith. And I thought, like, I want people to know me that way. I want to be looked back on in history as a woman of faith. So I have decided to change the name on my podcast, which is my actual name, Kylie Kupfer. I'm still going by Kat because I want to make that happen. I just want a nickname, okay? And I've decided the Cat is my nickname for this podcast. And if you ever see me in person and choose to call me Cat, I would love you for it. I don't know how you feel about that, like people making nicknames for themselves, but I don't care right now. Either way, that's kind of where I'm at with this. And since I've answered kind of all of those questions, let's talk about some future plans and goals I have for the podcast. I definitely have some episodes that I still want to do. I know my next one is going to be about fruit. I've been like thinking about it for a long time, and I know I want to do one on fruit, but unfortunately, the other reason I haven't been posting for a while is because of summer, and this is my first summer where I've had my daughter all day, every day, and just have not had the time or the ability to work on the podcast like I have before. So that just really kind of fell by the wayside, and all this kind of other stuff going on, and my grandma just passed away last week. It seems, far away, but also really soon still. So just been kind of going through a lot with that, but I do have episodes. They're lined up. I'm not running out of ideas yet. I promise. I just haven't been able to post. Haven't been able to work on anything. I've got like fruit. I know I want to do one on water. I also want to do one on the movie, the old 1990s Hercules Disney movie, because I think that one just has so many great things in it. And I got other ones. I just can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but I do have episodes lined up. And another thing that I'm kind of toying with is possibly doing more conversational format podcasts where I actually have like a guest on and I talk about their random hobbies and how their hobbies have helped them learn something either about spirituality or the nature of God. I already have friends in mind. I think it would be interesting to kind of have some more of these like conversational type ones where maybe that would initiate more conversations. Because like I said, my ultimate goal is to just have more conversations about the gospel, about God, about Christ, about this earth, because I think so many times we get into this idea that if we're not learning it at church or in conference or directly from the scriptures, like it's not true. That's why before every episode of my podcast, I quote Moses 6:63, because he gave us this entire world and every single person in it. I personally believe that he's in everything and in everyone, and there's a little piece of him everywhere, and it's one big puzzle, and all the pieces are scattered around this entire world, and he's just waiting for us to find him. And so that's kind of like what this podcast is for, is like, I found another little puzzle piece, and it's just a little piece, but I think it's really cool, and I want to talk about it, and how this really random thing teaches me about God and Christ and who I am and what we're doing, and how all of these things are like parables for our grand plan. I think it all just kind of ties in together. Well, I didn't really have like a for sure way I was going to end this, so I guess I'll just say thanks for hanging out with me today while I yap about nonsense. Okay, so if this one goes up on August 3rd, then I am going to do my darndest to get my episode about fruit up on August 17th. So sticking with my every other week schedule still, I want to keep going for as long as possible, and maybe this time I can plan farther ahead for next summer and have episodes already like ready to go so that I'm not so behind. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me. I'm not sure how else to end this, and I know I have to go back and fix some of those old episodes with my old pseudonym in it, so just give me some time. I'm figuring it all out, so I will see you guys next time, and I hope you find God somewhere unusual today. Bye!